The afternoon sun bathed the streets of General Santos City, on the southern coast of the Philippines, when the black limousine stopped in front of the small municipal school. Manny Pacquiao adjusted his imported silk tie and took a deep breath. This place had been his second home during childhood, long before he became Pac-Man, world boxing champion in 8 different weight classes, Filipino senator, and global icon. 25 years had passed since his feet last touched that schoolyard, a time when his family barely had enough to eat, and he sold cigarettes on the streets to help with the family income. The school wasn't on his official itinerary. The security detail, advisors, and photographers were waiting for him at the city sports center, where an important ceremony would take place in 2 hours. But something that morning, while traveling through the streets of his hometown on his triumphant return, made him ask the driver to turn left toward the humble neighborhood where he grew up. Pacquiao walked slowly through the deserted corridors of the school, now closed for the end of the school day. The structure had been renovated, but he still recognized the details. The specific cracks in the floor, the way light entered through the high windows, the smell of chalk and aged wood. Each step evoked memories of a skinny, determined boy who dreamed of one day giving his mother, Dionysia, a better life. It was then that Manny spotted an elderly man, back curved by the weight of years, slowly pushing a mop along the main corridor. The movements were slow, methodical, each step calculated as if preserving energy to complete the extensive work. Even from behind, there was something familiar about that silhouette, something that instantly transported Pacquiao back to his childhood memories. Uncle Ernesto wasn't really anyone's uncle, but everyone at school called him that. He was the janitor, a constant figure in the corridors for the past 40 years, a man of few words who took care of the school as if it were his own home. During Manny's childhood, Uncle Ernesto was already a respected presence, and now, there he was, still working, his hair completely white, his shoulders even more hunched, but with the same dedication as always. During the time when Manny studied there, few paid attention to the old janitor. Students passed by him as if he were invisible. Teachers barely greeted him beyond occasional requests to clean a room or fix a broken desk. He was just part of the school landscape, as common as the building itself. However, for young Manny, Uncle Ernesto had always been different. Pacquiao remembered how, at 12 years old, he had been caught sleeping in class, not out of laziness or disinterest, but because he had spent the previous night selling roasted peanuts on the streets of General Santos until after midnight to help his mother. The teacher, unaware of his situation, had sent him outside as punishment. Downcast and hungry, Manny had hidden in the small storage room at the back of the school. It was there that Uncle Ernesto found him, not to report him, but to share his own lunch, a simple rice with fish wrapped in a banana leaf. Day after day, when Manny arrived without food, the janitor, coincidentally, appeared with extra food. They never talked about it. It was a silent agreement between a man who understood the struggle for survival and a boy who would never forget that kindness. As he watched the elderly janitor working laboriously, Manny felt a lump in his throat. 79 years old, he calculated, and still pushing that mop through the corridors. A question troubled his mind. Why did a man of that age still need to work? The Philippines had a retirement system, but Manny knew the reality of his country well. Many elderly people continued working until they had no strength left, especially those without family members to support them. With silent steps, he approached the old man, who continued concentrating on his work, unaware of the famous visitor's presence. When he finally turned around, Uncle Ernesto's tired eyes widened for an instant. The bucket almost fell from his trembling hands. It wasn't every day that a global celebrity appeared at his workplace, much less someone he had watched grow up decades ago. The recognition was mutual and instantaneous. In the wrinkled face of the old janitor, Pacquiao saw flashes of his own history. The poverty that nearly engulfed him, the silent sacrifices of people like Uncle Ernesto, the invisibility of common workers who kept the world running without recognition or glory. A world now separated the two men. Manny, in his tailor-made Italian suit, luxury watch on his wrist, owner of mansions and businesses. Uncle Ernesto, in his faded janitor uniform, with permanent calluses on his hands and shoes worn by constant use. But in that moment, what Manny saw wasn't the social difference, but rather the contrast between his own transformation and the unchanging nature of the life of the man who had once helped him. In the minutes that followed, as they walked slowly through the schoolyard, Manny discovered that Uncle Ernesto's life had been marked by a series of misfortunes and silent sacrifices. His wife had passed away more than a decade ago, victim of an illness that required expensive treatments, leaving him with debts he still paid. His only son had left to work in Dubai, sending money when he could, but with his own family to support, the help was insufficient. The retirement benefits he received barely covered his medications for high blood pressure and diabetes. So, even at 79 years old, Uncle Ernesto continued pushing his mop through the school corridors, not just out of financial necessity, but also because that place was the only home he really knew. With no children nearby, no wife, the school and its students were his only family. What impressed Pacquiao most wasn't just the elderly man's difficulties, but how, despite everything, Uncle Ernesto still found ways to help others. He continued setting aside part of his lunch for students he saw hungry, sometimes bought basic school supplies with his own money for children who clearly couldn't afford them, and never, in 40 years, had missed a single day of work. It was the same kindness that Manny had experienced in childhood, multiplied by decades of silent service. As the janitor spoke, without self-pity or resentment, Pacquiao felt something transforming inside him. It wasn't just gratitude or compassion, but a deep reflection on the true meaning of wealth and fulfillment. Manny Pacquiao's return to General Santos was being widely publicized by the media. He had come to announce the construction of a large sports complex that would bear his name, a multi-million-dollar investment that would include a state-of-the-art boxing academy, Olympic swimming pools, and multi-sport courts. It was his gift to the city that saw him born, a way to inspire the next generation of Filipino athletes. But as he listened to Uncle Ernesto, something changed in Pacquiao's mind. The sports complex would be important, yes, but how many Uncle Ernestos existed in his city? How many elderly people worked well beyond retirement age simply because they had no choice? How many acts of silent kindness went unnoticed every day? Without revealing his intentions, Pacquiao invited the janitor to accompany him to the official ceremony that afternoon. Uncle Ernesto initially refused, looking at his simple uniform, but Manny insisted. It wasn't a request, but a necessity. That man needed to be present. The presence of the old janitor, seated in the front row alongside important politicians and businessmen, caused whispers in the audience. No one understood why the country's biggest celebrity had reserved a place of honor for a simple school employee. The answer would come soon, and would surprise everyone. On the stage set up in the center of the city, in front of hundreds of people and television cameras broadcasting to the entire country, Manny Pacquiao began his speech as planned, talking about his childhood in General Santos, his journey to becoming a world champion, and his eternal gratitude to the city that shaped his character. But then, the speech took an unexpected turn. Pacquiao asked Uncle Ernesto to join him on stage. With visible discomfort and humility, the elderly janitor climbed a few steps, leaning on his mop as if it were a cane. As the crowd watched in silence, Manny put his arm around the fragile shoulders of the man and told a story that few knew. How that invisible janitor had fed a hungry boy, how small acts of kindness can change a person's destiny, how true wealth is not in world titles or bank accounts, but in the ability to help when no one is looking. With a voice choked with emotion, Pacquiao made his announcement. The planned sports complex would be built, yes, but with a fundamental change. Half of the investment would be redirected to create the Uncle Ernesto Foundation, dedicated to supporting elderly workers in General Santos. The foundation would provide retirement supplements, medical assistance, and dignified housing for people like the janitor, city workers over 65 who still needed to work to survive. The foundation's first action, Pacquiao announced, would be the purchase of a house for Uncle Ernesto, along with a lifetime fund that would ensure he never needed to work again, unless he wanted to, as a volunteer, to teach new generations the value of kindness and perseverance. In the days that followed, the story of the janitor and the world champion spread throughout the Philippines and beyond. International television networks reproduced the scene of the old man silently crying on stage, while Pacquiao highlighted how a simple act of kindness had helped shape his own journey. It wasn't just a touching story, it was a powerful reminder of how small actions can create waves of impact through time. For Uncle Ernesto, the change was overwhelming. After decades of being invisible, he was suddenly the center of attention. The small house he received, a few blocks from the school, became a symbol in the community. Although he no longer needed to work, he still appeared at the school 3 times a week, not to clean, but to tell stories to the students, teaching them about dignity, hard work, and the importance of helping others without expecting recognition. For Manny, the transformation was equally profound. As a politician, he had always sought ways to help those in need, but the reunion with Uncle Ernesto had awakened something more personal and meaningful. The foundation quickly expanded to other cities, finding and supporting hundreds of elderly workers with similar stories. Each new beneficiary was personally interviewed by Pacquiao or members of his team, ensuring that the project maintained its human essence. The media highlighted how this initiative was different from other celebrity charity projects. It wasn't just about donating money, but about recognizing the intrinsic value of people whom society had marginalized. And most importantly, these elderly people weren't treated as passive recipients of charity, but as living treasures of the community, people whose wisdom and experience deserved respect and learning. 1 year after the unexpected encounter in the school corridors, the Pacquiao Ernesto Sports Complex was inaugurated in General Santos City. The joint name of the world champion and the janitor symbolized the central message of the project. Greatness and humility can and should walk side by side. The sports center quickly became a model for similar projects throughout the country. Its most distinctive feature wasn't just the modern facilities, but the fact that elderly people from the Uncle Ernesto Foundation worked there as mentors, telling their stories to young athletes, reminding them that character comes before medals, that silent kindness has more value than noisy fame. The new phase of Pacquiao's career surprised even his harshest critics. Those who saw him only as a boxer who had entered politics began to recognize a depth they hadn't perceived before. His focus on programs for the elderly and invisible workers created a new model of social action in the Philippines, where celebrities and politicians usually preferred more glamorous and photogenic projects. Uncle Ernesto, at 80 years old, became a respected figure in his community and beyond. When asked how he felt about having helped a future world champion decades ago, his answer was always the same, with a humble smile. He hadn't done anything special, just shared what he had with someone who needed it more. He had no idea who that boy would become, and that made the gesture even more valuable. For Manny Pacquiao, the encounter with his former benefactor had provided a clarity that no world title or electoral victory had ever achieved. True strength wasn't in defeating opponents in the ring or in politics, but in recognizing and elevating those whom society had made invisible. His legacy wouldn't be measured just by boxing gloves hanging in museums or by laws passed in Congress, but by the restored dignity of people like Uncle Ernesto, everyday heroes whose stories deserve to be told and celebrated. On a quiet afternoon, watching young people training in the new complex while Uncle Ernesto told stories to a group of children sitting in a circle, Pacquiao understood a fundamental truth. Sometimes, we need to return to the beginning of our journey to truly understand where we need to go. And perhaps, in the end, it's not the great victories that define a life, but the small moments of kindness, given or received, that truly shape who we become. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.